All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Difficult Conversations by Supply the Why. I am Dean, if this is your first time joining us. And tonight we have a very heavy subject, something that is near and dear to my heart as a first responder. We are going to be discussing the uptick in first responder suicides, to include police officers, firefighters, EMS, and, of course, dispatchers as well. Tonight we have a very special guest. We have the president and CEO of First Help, Miss Karen Solomon. Karen, how you doing?
Hey, good, Dean. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for taking the time out to join us. This is a show that I've wanted to do for quite some time. It's near and dear to my heart. And if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and what brings you here tonight, that would be great.
Sure. Yep. So, as you said, my name is Karen Solomon. I am one of the co-founders and the president of First Help. We were formerly known as Blue Help. We've expanded to include all first responders. So, we're a nonprofit organization. We raise awareness about first responder suicide, and we help the families in the aftermath. We do a lot of resiliency and prevention training, and just really try to move the needle when it comes to changing the culture, so that first responders can get the help they need and their families have the support they need after a suicide, and hopefully enough support before, so that we don't have the suicide. So our goal is to not be here next time, because we want to stop suicide.
That's a heck of a goal. So what made you start this, or you and your co-founder? What was the reasoning behind getting this very needed organization started?
Yeah, so it's a kind of a weird little story that we certainly didn't set this as a goal. What happened was, after the incidents in Ferguson, my husband's been a police officer for 26 years now, and the whole Ferguson situation and the negative rhetoric towards law enforcement was very frustrating for myself and my family. So I wrote a book called Hearts Beneath the Badge, just to kind of to explain to people how officers are human too, and they do good things, and we really shouldn't dislike them so much. And that led to a second book called The Price They Pay, which I wrote with co-founder Jeff McGill. And that was a collection of stories about officers who suffered on the job, compassion fatigue, emotional injuries, physical injuries, and really the lack of support that they got after their injuries. And we also wrote about people who died by suicide. So that kind of led to us saying, why isn't anybody paying attention to suicide? So we started this page. We said, we're going to make an Officer Down memorial page for suicide. We're going to honor these officers' lives, because there's no reason to shame them in their death after they've served their communities very well. And it's just morphed into this organization where we are doing a lot more than just honoring officers. We're supporting their families. We're preventing suicide. So it was kind of a snowball.
Well, I, for one, am very thankful for you and for even going down this road. I know it couldn't have been easy. What are some of the challenges you faced when you first rolled out this organization?
Oh, there was a lot of challenges. So we started this January 1st, 2016. So if you think back 6 years, nobody was talking about suicide. There was no data collected year over year. Nobody wanted to talk about it. People told us we couldn't talk about it. We shouldn't talk about it. We brought families to Police Week in 2019 to honor their loved ones, because they went there when they were alive, and there was no reason not to go when they were gone, even though it was a suicide, and we were told we didn't belong there. So it was an uphill battle. The stigma associated with this was just tremendous, and nobody wanted to talk about it.
Why were you told that you didn't belong there?
Because Police Week, there's a perception that Police Week is to honor the fallen, the heroes. And the belief is that if you died by suicide, you are not a hero, you are not heroic, you shouldn't be honored. But if you read the Police Week proclamation, and this is something that I've preached since day one, the Police Week proclamation doesn't end at honor those who died in the line of duty. It says, and those who were injured in the line of duty. But that is often left out of Police Week information. The original proclamation clearly states, and those injured. So that, to me, is physically and emotionally injured. But if you go to Police Week, you will see that it is primarily about the dead or the living, and there's no in between. So that was where we kind of first put a stake in the ground, and we had a huge display at the memorial of faces of people who died by suicide, and it was tough. It was tough, but the families were unbelievably grateful. It was amazing. But we, like I said, it was really an uphill battle because people weren't ready to change their minds about it yet. Nobody was ready to talk about it. And now you see there's been a tremendous change.
Very much so. And to your point, overnight almost too. You know, in the world of policing, you know what I mean? Like a 5-year span is essentially overnight. If you talk about the history of policing going back to, say, like, you know, like Sir Robert Peel and back in those days, whereas, you know, leaders of organizations are embracing mental health treatment and mental health days, and making sure that people have outlets to discuss, you know, critical incidents, making sure that they have this critical incident teams that you can bring in to debrief your staff when you have you know, some of those unthinkable type calls. So yeah, you're 100% right.
Yeah, and I think part of it too is, you know, it has to be more than a debrief. And this was one of the things I, you know, is also, and we all were concerned about in the beginning. So you have this debriefing, but that's pretty meaningless 3 months down the road. You have to have stress management, and that means more than just the debrief a week later. You need to take a look 3 months later, 6 months later. How is everybody doing? How are they affected? Because quite often the effects of an incident don't show up immediately, or they stuff it down and try to hide it. So that was a big deal too, because that's expanded over the years as well, because it was just this, hey, let's have a debrief, let's check in. And now it's a lot more than that. There's a lot more, you know, peer support. There's more long-term care. Yep. There's, you know, all that stuff that's going on now. And I think that over the last 6 years, it's really, it's to me, having been involved in this, I am amazed at the change in the culture that we've had. Still not enough, but more than I ever expected. It's great.
Well, it's unbelievable. So I'm going to hit the chat really quick. So first of all, Mike wants to welcome you to the show, and Heidi wants to ask, what programs and tools are you offering to prevent first responder suicide?
Sure. So we have what's called the responder readiness courses, and this is funded in partnership with FirstNet, AT&T, and it is responder readiness, family readiness, and supervisor readiness. There are 3 separate classes that talk about resilience and how we can be prepared as families, how first responders can be prepared, how to start the conversation. So we have that training. We have mission-ready retreats that first responders can go to, also funded by FirstNet, AT&T. It's completely 100% free, all expenses paid, to take first responders away for a week, kind of get them talking, learning some tools, coping tools. We have a lot of that. We also refer people out to a lot of different resources. There are so many amazing organizations and people out there teaching and training and doing suicide prevention. So we have that. You know, that's not ours, but we refer you out. So if you can't make it to one of our trainings, if you can't make it to our retreat, we certainly can tell you somebody in your area that can help you out. So there's a lot of stuff out there. And we, like I said, we're not the catch-all, but we can certainly help people find what they need. But what we personally do is we do a lot of resiliency training.
All right. Well, let me ask you this just to clarify. So the retreats that you send people on, is that for people that have experienced traumatic incidents, or is that for anybody even before they get to that tipping point, so to speak?
Any first responder. Any
first responder.
Yep. So because you want to get there before you get to the tipping point, because if if it's before the event, when the event happens, then you have the tools to cope with it, and then you are able to move on from that incident much more quickly had you not had those tools. So we would prefer you get there before an incident. Obviously, if you've had an incident and you are having issues, you should get help, and whether it's this retreat or not, we can work on that with you to figure that out. But it's for any first responder in any stage of their career.
All right. Well, that's it. Thank you for clearing that up. Folks, if you're just tuning in, I'm here with Karen Solomon, and we are discussing first responder suicide, and that includes, again, police, firefighters, EMS, and, of course, our lifelines, which are our dispatchers. So if you are on Facebook, please jump in the chat. YouTube, LinkedIn, please jump in the chat, ask your questions while we have Karen here. So our next question that we have is, Karen, what's your feeling on being open about police suicides with each respective department, particularly those that have lost an officer to suicide? Should departments be upfront from the beginning or gauge the family dealing with the loss?
So that's very easy. That is the department should work with the family. A suicide is a different kind of death. So a line of duty death, it becomes very public immediately. And I do know that there are some line of duty families who didn't want that. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, we believe that we somehow own first responders and they're part of our family. And when one of them dies in the line of duty, we want to give something back to them and honor them, right? So it becomes very public. Suicide is very personal. Many times the families either witness the death or they find their first responder after the death. It's a different kind of loss. So we don't want to just go public with it. And it's also because of the stigma in society, it's not necessarily the right thing to do. Many families will come forward right away and say, here's what happened, do better, be better, don't don't die by suicide. Some families aren't ready for a very, very long time to talk about it publicly and they don't want it to be known publicly. There are families who will put something else in the obituary or they will be very vague because they just don't want to talk about it. We had a family that her son died by suicide and she didn't even tell her neighbors. And she joined our support group, she joined our family, so to speak. And about a year and a half in, she called me up and she said, you know, I'm finally ready to talk about it. She said, you guys gave me the courage to talk about this. Seeing other families come forward gave me the courage to talk about this. So I want to tell people now that Erin died by suicide. I want to talk about it. So every single family is different. Every situation is different. So you absolutely should take guidance from the family. But what you shouldn't do is you should not change the way you treat that family after a suicide. You treat them the same that you would treat a line of duty, a cancer, any other off duty death. They are entitled to off duty honors. They are entitled to be told what benefits they will be losing, what they will and won't get. They were entitled to have some kind of support from the department. So that you should not change because they are going to need your support and they're going to be afraid to ask for it.
Karen, so can I just have you circle back, talk a little bit about the benefits that they will or will not get? A lot of folks don't realize that it depends how you pass away while you're on the job, what type of benefits you're entitled to. So if you could just touch upon that a little bit.
Yeah, and that's something I couldn't believe people don't know about. So, this is I am just stating a fact. I'm not passing any judgment. If someone dies in the line of duty, they get an automatic federal death payout. This year's death payout is $380,000. $387,000, and every year it changes, it increases incrementally with inflation and stuff. So God forbid my husband dies in line of duty, I get $387,000 from the federal government right out of the gate. I get his full pension for life. I get benefits for life. That's education for my kids, education for myself, health insurance for myself, health insurance for my kids. Living in Massachusetts, I get another $300,000 death payout. I would walk away with almost $2 million in cash and benefits after my husband, God forbid, dies in the line of duty. And that's not to include the fundraisers that people have and the tunnels to tower paying off your mortgage and everything. Now, God forbid my husband dies by suicide, I will get nothing. They will shut off his benefits the day he dies, and I will get absolutely nothing. My husband's been on the job for 26 years, so I would still get some of his pension, whatever he would be entitled to at the time of his death. But many families, they're either not on the job long enough, so they don't get anything. But if their husband was on the job for a year and died in line of duty, they would get everything. We have families with kids that they are not told they'd be losing their benefits that show up at the hospital with their kids sick and they say, you don't have any health insurance anymore. So shame on us for treating them so poorly and not telling them. So essentially, there's a huge gap. Now, that's changed over the past 6 years, just like everything else. So in some states, you are now entitled to benefits. You saw Chicago now passed a law. Ohio Police
Yeah.
and Fire, they have a police and fire union. If you pay into this particular union, you will get, if you have to fight for it, and you have to prove that the suicide was tied to the job, you can get it. So everything that you get for suicide, you actually have to fight for it and prove. Now, line of duty, it's cut and dry. So line of duty, don't get me wrong, line of duty is heart attack, heat stroke, slip and fall. There's 22 different causes of line of duty death, but it's a presumption of the job. So the suicide is not. So we are currently waiting for President Biden to sign the Public Safety Officer Benefit of Act of 2022. And if he passes that, some first responders will now qualify for that one-time federal death payout. But it is just the one-time federal death payout. It is not any insurance or anything. They're still not going to go on the wall in DC. They're still not going to be honored and involved in these other events because it's just a federal. You're still going to have to fight for your city and state. But this is a huge step forward because it's going to open the floodgates now. It's going to say, yes, we finally figured out suicide is absolutely could be caused by this job, and we are going to support those families because they gave their life, their service to this job, and they deserve it.
See, it's funny. It's funny you mentioned that. Not funny in the haha sense, just ironic, I guess, that you mentioned that, because just like we spoke about earlier, where mental health is now a conversational point in most law enforcement buildings. Whereas when I first started 18 years ago, even maybe even 10 years ago, it was the type of thing where it was kind of like, just don't talk about it. Like, you just kind of, you go to a bad scene, you maybe something kind of gruesome or something like that, and you just kind of stuff it in, and you're expected to just go and finish your shift. Whereas nowadays, I know that even there's been times where I have maybe addressed somebody during shift, and if we didn't think that they were still ready to be out there, we told them it's okay to not be okay, and you can not go back out and handle. You're not letting anybody down if you don't go back out there.
Well, that's a good talking point right there. So, not going back out there. So, and I use this example all the time. The year my mother died, my stepfather died. It was a really bad year for me, and I like literally broke down one day at work, and I said, I have to go home. I'm having a mental breakdown. I need a couple weeks off. Sure, Karen, go ahead. You have vacation time. You have personal time. Go. Now, imagine being a first responder going, hey, I'm having a breakdown. Everybody in my family just died. I need to go home for a couple weeks. They're going to look at you like you're nuts. Like you can't just take police and people off the street. And it's not that easy for you. It's easy for people in the private sector, but what's also not easy for you is you still have to go to the next call. So we had some officers, you witness somebody in your department get shot and killed, and you still got to finish your shift. That's insane. How do you do that? You know what I'm saying? So there's so many differences between the way first responders have to function and the way we as non-first responders function. And obviously we have a little easier time of it because we are we're considered regular people with feelings, and you guys aren't, not for anything. But again, it's changing. It's definitely changing, and there are departments that will say, hey, you can go home now. There are departments that have these amazing wellness programs in place, but we're still a long way off from getting there.
A long way off for sure. A long way off. 100% is where we are. I just a really quick story. I at one point, I went to a call, and it was the death of a child, and it was I had to finish my shift. There's a long and short of it.
Yeah.
So I had to process the scene, write the report, and I was expected to go back out and finish my shift. And I'm not so sure in today's world that a lot of departments would continue to do that. So, just a quick story there about how times have changed for the better. So
absolutely.
Go ahead on. I'm just looking at the chat as we go here.
Yeah, so no, I absolutely agree. And I think there's been so many studies done that show, heart rates of first responders throughout their shift, how quickly they go up and down, and how they never quite go back down because you're always on. And just as you're decompressing, you're going to the next call. So that's something that I think has also influenced this. It's the physiology involved with this because it's not just an emotional thing, and I believe that's probably one of the reasons why you have the heart pill. Like here in Massachusetts, you can go out on the heart pill. A heart attack is considered line of duty death if, within 24 hours of certain things happening. So there's a lot involved. It's not just your emotions, it's the body and I believe that finally making that connection and doing it so publicly enabled people to be able to take some time off after a call or not finish the shift when they need to.
Well, it's a much needed change. I'm just looking at Dawn's comment here. It says all military services will
discharge you
if you report PTSD.
So I'm going to tell you, I'm not sure I agree with that. I'm not in the military, but I do know that the military is light years ahead of first responders, law enforcement, especially in terms of how they treat their mental health and how they honor their suicides. And there's so many other organizations out there that are supporting this, and they have different rules and regulations in place. So I'm not sure what particular service he's talking about, but I do know that they have gotten a lot better at this.
Is
But
what you're talking about, is it branch specific, or are you just saying as a whole military?
as a whole, military. And I can't speak for different units and different branches specifically, because I'm sure there are some kind of guidelines, and that brings up another issue. What are the guidelines for not allowing you to come back to work after you have an emotional issue, or bringing you back? I was speaking to a first responder, and she had issues, and she said, I am absolutely able to do my job again once I feel better, and why shouldn't I? And she's right. So there's got to be protocol and guidelines in place. And again, I can't really speak too much to the military, but I do know there's definitely still some issues, but they have better protocol in place than we do in law enforcement right now.
So as you talk about that, I will say that, one of the things that I think makes it more difficult for, I'll say law enforcement, for example, is the fact that you carry weapons.
Absolutely.
And when you carry these weapons, and though you're trained in them and all that, but how do you make sure somebody's in the right emotional state of mind once they come forward with something like this? So Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and so that's a hot topic, whether or not first responders should take their guns home, law enforcement should take their guns home. Are they doing it because they have access to their weapons? I've heard stories of people who would freeze their husband's weapons in a bucket, because he by the time you chipped away to get it, you're thinking how ridiculous this is, and you're not going to take your life. I mean, people come up with these weird ways to, and I'm not suggesting that anybody hide the guns or touch your husband's guns, please don't. But it was just an interesting roundtable, one of the conversations. But the bottom line is, first responders, law enforcement have access to guns, and people, the perception is they become a liability. So if you have an emotional issue, you're erratic, you're more likely to shoot yourself or somebody. So there is that fit for duty thing that we can go through. There's all kinds of other stuff. And again, there's not really a lot of guidelines other than the fit for duty, which is the extreme end of how to get somebody well and get them on the job. And there is actually a medication list that approved medications you can take as a law enforcement officer. So if you are a law enforcement officer and you are depressed or you're taking meds and somebody tells you you should be off the job because of it, you can look at this list and it will tell you that you're okay to do your job on these meds, because it's just helping you with your mood and whatnot. But I don't want to get too far off topic, but the bottom line is I don't have those answers, and I don't really think anybody does, because especially with the culture in America with gun violence and mass shootings, how do we, God forbid, it's some, recent. Okay, so for instance, an officer died recently, suicide by cop. He was suicidal. He took his gun. He went out, and he was aiming his weapon at other officers, and they ended up shooting him. So that could be a classic case against taking your guns home. You know what I mean? So it's just such a complicated issue. I don't think anybody has the answer for that.
Yeah, it's a difficult answer, because I would think in most states, here, I've been a police officer in 2 different states, and both of them, if you are licensed to carry on as a police officer, you can buy your own guns. Mm-hmm. So whether or not you take your gun from work home or not is inconsequential. That's, all right, so I leave this gun here and I go home and get, one of the guns I own, and we're in the same boat.
And how many people do you really know that have one gun? How many cops have one gun?
Yeah, not many. Most at least have an off-duty carry.
Exactly.
If for no other reason, just in case you run into somebody who didn't like a result of a call you were at, whether it means you had to arrest them or you had to have them, sectioned into a hospital or something like that. That happens. And then of course there's always the whole, like being a trained person. It's hard to, like when you go out to eat with your husband, where's he sit? Facing the door, right?
Yeah,
facing the door. Well, my family, they know, if there's a seat that's facing the door, they know that I'm don't even bother sitting there. That's my seat.
You know
And
how
a
many times
lot,
I've been stranded in the grocery store because he saw somebody, so he went and hid in the car, because he doesn't want him to know me, you know?
yeah, and that
Yeah,
and those are the things, and those are extra stresses that we live with
yeah,
as first responders. That the average person would have no idea what it's like to live like that from day to day. So, Karen, we're down to about 5 minutes. I just want to address the chat one more time.
yeah.
So, Mike says, with staffing shortages and or this do more with less mentality, how do we get better at minimizing continuous traumatic exposures? Is it practical?
Yeah, no. I mean, if we're doing more with less, staffing shortages, it's not practical. It's not going to happen.
Mhm.
You're probably going to experience more calls, more traumatic experiences. But what you can do that is practical is prepare yourself, and not just prepare yourself for resiliency. Learn resiliency tools, learn breathing skills, learn how to communicate with other people, learn to recognize signs in other people. But go home, make a list of resources in your area so that God forbid you need them or somebody you know needs them, so that you're prepared, because the last thing you want to do when you're in a crisis is scramble looking for help, because you're going to end up in the wrong place, or you're going to be too nervous and you're not going to be able to find the right kind of help. So prepare yourself with a list of what you think you would need in case of some kind of an emotional emergency, and prepare yourself so that you don't get that far down that path, so that you learn resiliency, you learn coping skills, you talk to somebody and trust that they are going to listen to you. That's one of the biggest challenges we all face, right? Is somebody taking us seriously and us opening our hearts to somebody else and being afraid of what they're going to think of us. So, Michael, if you are struggling and somebody doesn't want to listen to you and they don't want to talk to you and they don't want to take you seriously, that is not a reflection on you. That is a reflection on them. And you just move on and you find somebody else, because there are plenty of people who are out there who will support first responders and who will listen to you and who understand what you're going through. So that's my answer.
No, that's a fantastic answer. So, as we get down to it here, Karen, tell us. I know you got a lot going on, and I know that September's a big month for you. Tell us a little bit about what's on your plate and what we can expect out of First Help.
Sure. So September is Suicide Awareness Month, Suicide Prevention Month, and we have days at the end of the month for law enforcement, firefighter, telecommunications, and EMS suicide awareness days. We have walks around the country throughout the month. We have our annual honor dinner where we fly families at absolutely no cost that lost a family of first responders suicide. We give them a special weekend with other families, events, gifts, and honor dinner. And just some of the services we offer, because we didn't mention it, is we do offer college scholarships for kids who lose a first responder to suicide. We send out care packages to the families in the department after a suicide. We have retreats for them. We just had Camp April this past July. It was amazing, where we brought 20 families with kids. There was 65 people total to a retreat in Missouri, and they had a wonderful weekend, all expense paid. So we are really blessed to have some great supporters in Motorola and FirstNet that help us with these programs so we can serve the first responders we lose to suicide. So September is a big month for us because we have all the walks, we have the dinner. It's just it's a great month to get out there and talk to people and open the conversation about suicide. So make sure you do it.
You said that so emphatically, like you got me ready to run through a wall for you. You know, that's something. So what I will do is I will make sure that I replay this episode during that week. I plan to stay in touch with you. Can you give us some of the locations? I mean, I'm here in Massachusetts. Do you know offhand of anything you have that's live here in Massachusetts?
Braintree, August 28th. We have a walk. Then in September, we have a golf tournament for a Mass State Trooper. We have an officer who just reached out to us. So Braintree, we have our walk. We usually get about 300 people. We have a golf tournament in September. We just had an officer in Massachusetts reach out to us. He wants to walk from New York border to the Cape for in honor of us. So that'll be something cool. He's probably going to walk right by you, actually, Stoughton. Yeah, so we have a couple of things going on coming up in Mass that I'm going to get you to so we can meet you in person.
Yeah, that would be great. August 28th?
August 28th in Braintree. Yeah, at the high school.
Okay, I think that is a Sunday, I believe,
it is.
Right? Okay. All right, yeah, so we can talk a little bit more about that.
Church to go talk about suicide prevention. God will let you.
What's that?
Church. You can skip church that day.
All right, folks, you hear that? All right, Karen says it's okay, so That must be what it takes to be right with whoever you pray to. So, Karen, we're up on time. I got to say thank you so much. This half hour flew by. There's been a lot of great information here. How can people reach out to you? How can people find you? Really quick.
Yeah, absolutely. Firsthelp.org. 1ST, the number 1ST, first help. HELP.org. And from there, you can link to all of our pages and you can see the work we do. You can see videos of our events. You can see the people we've lost to suicide. So just go to our website.
All right, Karen, this has been outstanding. Thank you so much for taking time away from your family, for being here. Folks, if you like this episode or if you know somebody who could benefit from the content of this episode, please like our pages on our social media. Please follow us and please share these episodes. People need to hear these conversations. They're just so important. So, folks, that's going to do it here from Supply the Why tonight. Stay with us, and we'll be back on with a live episode very soon. Have a great night, everybody, and always #Supply the Why.